There are a few things that can completely derail your sewing time on your Singer Featherweight, especially if you're new to using it or if it's been a while since you've sewn on it. So give me 5 minutes. I'm going to give you my 5 most popular tips to remember when using your Featherweight. For those that don't know me, my name is Andy Barney, and I'm a professional restorationist and machine technician, and I empower people to maintain, repair, restore, and troubleshoot sewing machines. So let's get started. So one of the things that happens very commonly after you've either cleaned out, taken off the needle plate and cleaned under there to get some lint out or remove a caught thread, or if you already know how to service your own machine, one of the quickest ways to think that you broke your machine is when you put the needle plate back on. This is extremely common and being missed on featherweights. And that's because unlike most other machines, you actually have a stitch finger here. This is your hook finger. And if you can see, let me turn my light a little bit better. You can see that it's actually sitting in this groove on the needle plate. So when if you're absentmindedly cleaning out, you take off your needle plate, clean around in here, and put it back on. If you forget to put this finger back in here, this is not going to pick up the thread properly. You're going to have skip stitches, broken threads, and it's not going to sew properly. So as an example, here we have the cover off, and what I want to show you is when this is, so you can see this hook can rotate freely when there's no needle plate here. And what happens is, so we'll leave it sitting like this. What happens is we absentmindedly put the needle plate back on. And so you can see there's the notches, but when I turn, this is not sitting in that notch. So it's moving all around. So what we need to do when we're putting our plate back on, what I do is make sure that my needle bar is all the way to the top so you have room to work. You're going to move your finger to where it's kind of upright. You have to have the bed down when you're putting this on because you can see the ledge actually blocks the path. So you can't lift it up and put this on and look. All right, so what I do is I just get the stitch finger up to the top, go ahead and place this on there, and it's probably not going to go down because of that finger. And then if you just turn it and kind of hold, but you can look underneath and you can actually, while you're holding the needle plate, just kind of move it over so that it's sitting in between. And then my needle plate is now in position. So if you're having missed stitches, skipped issues or whatever, check and make sure that that little hook finger is in place where it should be. So my second tip is actually pretty common on all machines, but I see it the most often on featherweights. And that's because typically, I wouldn't say typically, but most people that own a featherweight also sew on modern machines. So it's the one, we do have our vintage machine following where people sew only on vintage, but for many people they own all electronic computerized sewing machines except for their featherweight, which means they're used to the needle automatically going up and down when it's finished sewing a line. So if you finish sewing and your needle is all the way down, you have to get the needle back into the up position. It's very important that you only turn the hand wheel toward you to raise that needle back up. You never want to turn the hand wheel away from you. And what that does is causes the thread nesting and breakage in the bobbin. If you turn the hand wheel backward, the thread gets very confused in the bobbin, and that's what happens. So tip number 2 is always, always, always turn your hand wheel toward you, never away from you. So tip number 3 is I want to talk a little bit about the bobbin winder. And I'm not going to wind a full bobbin, but I do want to talk about you should have a little felt pad. If you're not using a thread stand, you want to have a piece of felt or fabric there so that when your machine feeds, it's going to have to rotate your thread spool. So you want to give it something soft to, it also eliminates backlash on the thread. So it doesn't let the spool move too fast. And then when you stop sewing, it still goes and backlashes. So first of all, make sure you have some type of felt pad. There's people that are crocheting little things that go on here. You just want something padded between the spool and the metal. Okay. And then of course, when you're winding your bobbin, you're coming all the way around. You're going into the tension disc. And then I like to go ahead and put my thread from the inside going out on the hole, and then putting it onto the bobbin winder post. Now, about the actual bobbin winder, when I first got my machine, and this was almost 15 years ago, I was not familiar with featherweights. I was brand new to them, believe it or not. And when it arrived, it was moving very slow, and I couldn't figure out why it was running so slow. So I called the dealer that I bought it from, and they were like, okay, we shipped it to you. So make sure that the bobbin winder is not sitting on the hand wheel. So first of all, if you're new to featherweights, make sure that unless you are winding a bobbin, it should not be engaged. And engaged means that this little tire here is sitting on the belt. So along the lines of this tip, when you're not sewing or winding a bobbin, you do need to disengage it. But most people have a tendency to raise the bobbin winder to sit in its highest position. This presents two problems. One, if you have a carrying case, chances are it's not going to fit properly, so that it's going to bang onto this. So you don't want it up anyway. The bigger issue is that inside this screw right here, in this little component, there is actually what they call a spring washer, and it's kind of a warped I don't know how to describe it. It's just a washer that allows it to keep tension but be movable. The problem is they don't make those washers anymore, and they are expensive to replace and kind of a hassle. So you don't want to wear out that spring. So when you're winding your bobbin, of course, put it down on your thing. When you're done winding your bobbin, you really just want to lift this enough, just enough to be off of the belt. So you can see this isn't raised up, but when I turn my hand wheel, it's not touching. So you really just need to raise it just high enough to be off the belt, and that'll preserve your spring. So our next tip is about the bobbin case and the bobbin. And again, this comes into play typically when someone's used to using a modern machine that has a drop-in bobbin rather than a front or side loading bobbin, or what we call a vertical bobbin. And it's just like your other machines, where if your bobbin is inserted in the wrong direction, then it's not going to work properly. So when you're loading your bobbin case, you want to make sure that your thread is winding counterclockwise. So if you look how I'm winding the thread, I'm going counterclockwise. So leave yourself a little bit of a tail. You're going to drop it into the bobbin case in that orientation, and then you're going to draw the thread through the tension spring until it comes out. And when you do this, you should be able to smoothly pull the thread. And then, of course, if you do that to check it, go ahead and clip your thread and leave yourself a little tail. Okay. So when you insert it into the machine, you do have a latch here. If your machine it's easier for you to do, you can use the latch to get it into the machine properly. And then, of course, the latch pulls it out. What I personally prefer to do to preserve the latch is I just kind of get it lined up, and then I snap it in. And then you can pull up your thread and you're good to go. All right, so one of the other issues that happens because people are used to using their modern machines where the needle pretty much goes in one direction, you have to have the needle inserted properly on your featherweight. So what I want you to look at here, the needle always has to be flat side to the left. So if you look at your needle, you have a flat side. If you look at the bed of your machine, you have this needle plate here that's shaped just like your needle. The flat side is on the left. There's also an arrow here on some of these. Now, some of you don't have an arrow because of the age and the manufacturing era of your machine, but the arrow I also use to remind me flat side to the left. So if you have you have to carefully get it in there. Make sure you can see your color indicator here on the right side. Get it in there and clamp it down. Then still make sure that your needle didn't rotate any. But if it's not in correctly, you're going to get skip stitches, broken stitches, no stitches, all kinds of issues. So use this plate. If nothing else, all the plates on featherweights are shaped the same as on 221s, maybe not the 222, but on 221 machines, you have a flat side to the left. That is your reminder that the needle has to go in flat side to the left.